On television, Jan Michael Vincent was Airwolf's Stringfellow Hawke, a quiet, invincible hero. With fame and fortune, he was the golden boy of 1980s Hollywood. But in real life, his biggest enemy was himself. His life was a series of addictions, toxic relationships, and self-destruction. His on-screen glory hid a cruel truth. The hero we loved was slowly falling apart. Let's take a look at Jan Michael Vincent's tragic journey from the heights of fame to the depths of oblivion. To understand the meteoric rise and the devastating fall of Jan Michael Vincent, we have to understand the world that made him. He was a product of a specific time and place, the sun-drenched yet turbulent landscape of post-war California and a Hollywood in the midst of a creative revolution. Born in 1944 in Denver, Colorado, Vincent was raised in the quiet agricultural town of Hanford in California's Central Valley. It was a world away from the glamour of Hollywood. This was a place of traditional values, hard work, and a certain kind of rugged American masculinity. His father was reportedly a strict, demanding figure, and some accounts suggest their relationship was fraught with tension, a dynamic that may have instilled in the young Vincent a rebellious streak and a deep-seated anger that would surface later in life. He was a natural athlete, a handsome, charismatic young man who excelled at swimming and football. But his real passion was the ocean. The allure of the Southern California coast, with its burgeoning surf culture, called to him. It was here, in this world of sun, sand, and waves, that the persona of Jan Michael Vincent, the quintessential golden boy, was born. This was the era of the Beach Boys, of a seemingly endless summer, and Vincent looked as if he had stepped right out of one of their songs. He was discovered not in an acting class, but because of his looks. A talent scout saw him, and just like that, he was on his way. This was the late 1960s, a time when Hollywood was undergoing a seismic shift. The old studio system was crumbling, and a new generation of filmmakers, the new Hollywood directors, was rising. They were looking for a different kind of star, more authentic, more rebellious, more real. They were tired of the polished perfection of the old guard. They wanted actors with an edge, a hint of danger, a raw, untamed quality. Jan Michael Vincent was the perfect fit. He wasn't a classically trained actor, but he had something more valuable, a natural, magnetic presence. He had a vulnerability that lay just beneath a brooding, often silent exterior. He could convey a world of emotion with just a look from his piercing blue eyes. Directors saw in him a raw talent that could be molded, a reflection of the restless, anti-authoritarian spirit of the times. As he entered the 1970s, he became part of this gritty, character-driven cinema. He was working alongside a new breed of leading men like Robert Redford, Burt Reynolds, and Charles Bronson, actors who blended classic good looks with a more modern, complex masculinity. This was the Hollywood that embraced him, seeing him not just as a pretty face, but as a serious actor with immense potential. But as the 1970s gave way to the 1980s, the cultural landscape shifted again. The gritty realism of the new Hollywood era was replaced by the high-gloss, high-concept entertainment of the Reagan years. It was the age of the blockbuster, the rise of the clear-cut, patriotic action hero. On television, this translated into a new kind of show, high-tech, action-packed, and led by charismatic, invincible heroes. Shows like Knight Rider, The A-Team, and Magnum, PI dominated the airwaves. It was this world that would make Jan Michael Vincent a global superstar, and it was this world that would ultimately amplify his demons and accelerate his downfall. He was a 1970s anti-hero trapped in the gleaming, superficial shell of a 1980s superstar, and the contradiction would prove to be explosive. The story of Jan Michael Vincent's career is a story of two distinct, conflicting chapters. The promising, critically respected film actor of the 1970s and the troubled, stratospherically famous television star of the 1980s. His career began with a contract at Universal Studios in the late 1960s. He started with guest spots on iconic shows like Bonanza and Dragnet. But it was clear from the beginning that he had his sights set on the big screen. His breakthrough came in the early 70s, where he quickly established himself as a versatile and compelling actor. One of his most significant early roles was in the 1972 film The Mechanic, starring alongside the legendary Charles Bronson. Vincent played the ambitious, ruthless apprentice to Bronson's master hitman. He held his own against the stoic Bronson, showcasing a cool, confident lethality that was captivating. He wasn't just a sidekick, he was a mirror image, a younger, more dangerous version of the star. The role proved he could handle complex, morally ambiguous characters. He followed this with a series of acclaimed performances. In 1974, he starred in Buster and Billy, a gritty, controversial film where he played a popular high school student who falls for the town outcast. It was a sensitive, nuanced performance in a film that tackled dark themes, and it earned him critical praise. He demonstrated a vulnerability that went beyond his good looks. But the film that truly cemented his image as the California Golden Boy was John Milius's 1978 surfing epic, Big Wednesday. Vincent played Matt Johnson, a self-destructive, legendary surfer grappling with the end of his youth and the looming Vietnam War. The role was perfect for him. It tapped into his natural athleticism, his love of the ocean, and his innate ability to portray a brooding, troubled soul. He was Matt Johnson. The film became a cult classic, and Vincent's performance was its soulful, tragic heart. He was on a trajectory to become one of the great movie stars of his generation. He worked with Burt Reynolds in Hooper, a blockbuster stuntman film, and carried his own as a heroic trucker in White Line Fever. By the early 1980s, he had proven his range and his bankability. His prestige peaked in 1983 with the landmark television miniseries The Winds of War. Based on Herman Wouk's epic novel, it was a massive, high-budget production starring Hollywood legend Robert Mitchum. Vincent played Byron Henry, the rebellious naval officer son of Mitchum's character. It was a demanding, dramatic role that required him to portray a character over a span of years through love, war, and tragedy. His performance was widely praised, and he was nominated for a Golden Globe. At this moment, he had it all: critical respect, mainstream popularity, and the looks of a Greek god. He was at the absolute summit of his career, and then came Airwolf. In 1984, super-producer Donald P. Bellisario, the man behind Magnum P.I., created a new show about a state-of-the-art supersonic helicopter and its reclusive pilot. For the lead role of Stringfellow Hawke, they needed an actor who could be a convincing action hero but also convey a deep sense of pain and isolation. Jan Michael Vincent was the perfect choice. Airwolf was an instant, massive hit. The show's combination of Cold War espionage, cutting-edge, for the time, technology, and breathtaking aerial action captured the imagination of audiences worldwide. And at the center of it all was Vincent as Stringfellow Hawke. Hawke was a quiet, brooding Vietnam veteran who lived in a secluded mountain cabin, finding solace only in playing his cello and flying his billion-dollar war machine. Vincent's performance was minimalist and magnetic. He said little, but his haunted eyes conveyed a world of trauma and loss. The role made him a global phenomenon. At his peak, he was earning an astonishing $200,000 per episode, making him the highest-paid actor on television. The fame was immense. The money was astronomical. From the outside, it looked like the ultimate triumph, but in reality, it was the beginning of the end. The pressures of starring in a weekly, high-demand television series were immense. The long hours, the repetitive nature of the work, and the intense public scrutiny began to take their toll. But the real problem was that the money and fame were pouring gasoline on a fire that had been burning within him for years. His addictions, particularly to alcohol and cocaine, which had been a problem throughout his career, now spiraled completely out of control. His behavior on the set of Airwolf became notoriously erratic. He would show up late, unprepared, or sometimes not at all. He struggled to remember his lines. His co-star, the legendary Ernest Borgnine, a consummate professional from Hollywood's golden age, grew increasingly frustrated. Borgnine tried to mentor him, to be a father figure, but Vincent was unreachable. Borgnine later recounted his heartbreak, saying, "The boy was a brilliant actor, but he was a troubled young man. I tried to talk to him. I said, 'Jan, you're ruining your life,' but he wouldn't listen." The stories from this period are legion: public brawls, arrests for drunk driving, erratic behavior that alienated producers and co-stars. He was living the life of a self-destructive rock star, not a professional actor. By the third season of Airwolf, his problems were so severe that he was often written into scenes where his character would be sitting or lying down to accommodate his inebriation. The production had to hire a body double for even simple scenes. The network, CBS, had had enough. After 3 seasons, despite still being popular, the show was canceled, in large part due to the immense difficulty of working with its star. A 4th season was made for a different network with a new cast, but the magic was gone. Airwolf was over, and so, effectively, was Jan Michael Vincent's career as a major star. He had reached the pinnacle of television fame and in less than 3 years had managed to burn it all to the ground. The long, tragic fall had begun. The story of Jan Michael Vincent's life is a story of profound contradictions, of a man blessed with extraordinary gifts who seemed driven by an unquenchable desire to destroy them. The emotional core of his tragedy lies in the deep chasm between his public persona, the cool, controlled hero, and his private reality, which was a chaotic maelstrom of addiction, violence, and self-loathing. Those who knew him during his golden years often spoke of 2 Jan Michaels. There was the charming, intelligent, and sometimes surprisingly shy man who could captivate a room. He was a gifted conversationalist, well-read, and deeply passionate about the ocean. Directors like John Milius were drawn to his raw, authentic energy. He wasn't just playing a surfer in Big Wednesday. He was a surfer, and that authenticity bled through the screen. But then there was the other Jan Michael, the one ruled by his demons. This was the man who would disappear on days-long benders, fueled by cocaine and alcohol. This was the man with a hair-trigger temper, who would get into vicious bar fights over the slightest perceived insult. This was the dark side that grew more and more dominant as his fame and fortune increased. His personal relationships were a battlefield. He was married 3 times, and his relationships were notoriously volatile. His second wife, Joanne Robinson, filed for a restraining order in 1994 to 1995, alleging that he had been physically abusive throughout their marriage. She claimed he had beaten her, causing a broken nose and permanent injuries, and that his heavy drinking turned him into a different, terrifying person. The court battles were messy and public, tarnishing his hero image. A later girlfriend also won a multi-million-dollar judgment against him after alleging he had physically assaulted her, causing her to miscarry. These incidents paint a disturbing picture of a man whose inner rage, so effectively channeled into his brooding on-screen characters, would explode in his private life with devastating consequences. It's a difficult truth to reconcile with the gentle hero so many people loved on screen. The car accidents that punctuated his life were not just random misfortunes, they were violent manifestations of his self-destructive lifestyle. He was involved in numerous alcohol-related crashes throughout his life, but two, in particular, were catastrophic. In 1992, a severe crash left him with serious injuries. Then, in August 1996, came the one that ended it all. While driving drunk, he rear-ended his girlfriend's car, an act that some have speculated was intentional. He was thrown from his own vehicle and suffered a broken neck. He was in a coma for a month. When he emerged, he was permanently changed. The accident had crushed his larynx, leaving his voice a permanent, raspy whisper. The golden boy voice was gone forever. He also suffered a traumatic brain injury that affected his memory. He was left in a state of chronic, debilitating pain. This physical wreckage became a prison. The athletic, vibrant man was gone, replaced by someone who struggled with basic mobility. The chronic pain only deepened his dependence on alcohol as a form of self-medication. The emotional impact of this physical decline cannot be overstated. For a man whose entire identity was built on his physical presence, his athleticism, and his classic good looks, this was a living death. He descended further into the world of low-budget, direct-to-video films, his name now a shadow of its former glory, his performances often hampered by his physical limitations. Perhaps the most heartbreaking glimpse into his inner world comes from a rare, devastating interview he gave in 2014. By this point, his health had completely collapsed. A severe leg infection, a complication of peripheral artery disease, had led to the amputation of his right leg below the knee. The man on screen was almost unrecognizable. He was frail, gaunt, his face a roadmap of a hard-lived life. His memory was failing. When the interviewer asked him about his glory days on Airwolf, he seemed distant, confused, at one point saying he didn't even remember the show that had made him a global icon. The interview is a profoundly sad document, the final, tragic chapter of a life that had promised so much and ended in such ruin. It shows a man not just physically broken, but spiritually exhausted, a ghost haunted by a life he could barely recall. His final years have left a lingering question unanswered. His death on February 10, 2019, in a North Carolina hospital of cardiac arrest, was not known to the world. The harsh truth is that the news of his passing was not announced until nearly a month later, on March 8th, when the celebrity news site TMZ accidentally discovered his death certificate and reported it. There was no official statement from his family, no condolences from his publicist. For nearly 30 days, one of the biggest TV stars of the 80s lay down his life in absolute silence. The silence from Hollywood has been equally astonishing. There have been no grand tributes from major studios or those who worked with him, no public mourning from the industry that once celebrated him. The man who was once one of the world's biggest stars has passed into near-total oblivion. As soon as the news broke, social media sites like Twitter and Facebook exploded with a wave of sadness and nostalgia. Thousands of people shared clips of Airwolf featuring Stringfellow Hawke sitting quietly behind his aviator sunglasses, accompanied by the iconic synthesizer soundtrack. They weren't just mourning an actor. They were mourning a part of their childhood, an icon of 80s cool and heroism. For many, the biggest shock wasn't his death, but the fact that he had been gone for nearly a month without anyone knowing. This detail became a focal point of discussion, highlighting the loneliness and tragedy of his final years. Photos of him later, gaunt, tired, with a leg amputated, were often published alongside his peak self, creating a heartbreaking contrast that left many feeling heartbroken. His death sparked outrage among fans who questioned how a star of such stature could be so cruelly forgotten. Angry comments blasted the entertainment industry as fake and ungrateful, accusing Hollywood of milking his talent and youth and then throwing it away when he was no longer commercially viable. But the fan response was more than just mourning a hero. It was more complicated. Many openly acknowledged his personal demons, alcoholism, abuse allegations, but they still expressed sympathy. Their condolences are not just for the lost star, but for the wasted potential, for the tragedy of a life gone wrong. Jan Michael Vincent's legacy is not the heroes he played on screen, but a tragic warning about waste. He had it all: talent, fame, and the looks of a god. But he lost it all to his own demons. His story is a heartbreaking testament that fame and fortune cannot save you from the battle with yourself. In the end, we may remember the hero Airwolf, but it is the story of Jan Michael Vincent, the man who could have been a legend but chose the path of self-destruction. That is the truest and most heartbreaking legacy.